Alright, we're here at TableSoccerUSA.com for all your professional table soccer equipment needs, and Paul Eyes is going to talk to you about the progression of Subbuteo style bases and the evolution of them and the differences between them each.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these figures. We'll get to the goalkeepers a little bit later, but what we have here is some kind of history of Subbuteo and what we're going to talk about what each one can do. These are heavyweight figures of Subbuteo, made in the 1960s and 1970s. The base, I don't know if you can see the detail on the film here, is fairly narrow on the bottom, okay, but this was a very popular figure at the height of Subbuteo in the 60s and 70s. Moving into the 80s, we have the lightweight figure, and it is lighter than the heavyweight, okay? And then in the 90s, we had still a Subbuteo product made by Hasbro, is a solid one-piece base with a much flatter bottom. Then what happened in Subbuteo in the 90s, we started moving into some cottage industries of Subbuteo, making their own equipment. Some of the players who were very serious about the game started to make different figures with very flat bases here. This is called a sports figure type figure, and this was allowed the player to curl the figure and still slide the figures, as we'll talk about later. Hasbro, who owns the rights to Subbuteo right now, have been making some products which is almost going back to the beginnings of Subbuteo, with a flat two-dimensional figure and a base on the bottom which is actually very narrow and even has a logo inscribed at the bottom, which we'll talk about later. Again, kind of on the lines of the sports figure here, some equipment we carry at Table Soccer USA. There's a figure, this is the GT or Sure Shot type base, which is what we carry here at TableSoccerUSA.com, is a pro type base, or pro level base, which is a flatter bottom, but has some ridges on the top of the base, which will hopefully show you, allow you to be able to chip the ball, which is great for shooting and adds a lot of enjoyment to the game. Then we get into bases here. We got these from Europe. These are Rexy Bases, and these bases again flat on the bottom, and on the top of the ring here is a two-part base. There is like a beveled edge, and this is particularly good for shooting and maybe a softer shot, and used by a lot of top players in European play and tournament play. I want to show you some things that we can actually do with these figures. So kind of let's look at them in order, I guess. The heavyweight style figure. We've got a two-part base here, and flicking the figure, not as reliable for going long distances. I'm going to try to use the same technique. I'm going to try to hit the ball from here, for example, just a little bit short, but actually wasn't too bad, okay, and striking against the ball. One thing that's definitely a feature is that there's a very hard and sharp edge here, so the ball can jump away from you. So for controlled play of the game, that is an issue, but a very, very popular figure from the 1970s. This is when Subbuteo was at its height. Now we have the lightweight figure, a much lighter in feel as we pick this up. Very, very light, and again, the game was still popular at this time in the 80s. And flicking this figure tends to look at the wobbling as we're flicking the figure, and also very common, as I saw there, and I'm using the same technique for the figures to fall over, okay, but still can play the game. Again, a sharper edge, and if we were to shoot with this figure, very, very difficult. That's a goal right there, of course, but very, very difficult to chip the ball. Next to impossible. A lot of players actually would start to take apart the base and put clay or other sort of wax in there to give it some extra weight that would help them chip the ball. This is a figure a lot of people find on eBay, and they look at Subbuteo and they see the products that we have here and think, oh boy, this is so much cheaper, I'm going to get some of these figures. And then of course they're playing the game and the figures are falling over. They can't do what they see from the top level players, or they see the game being played at a different level. Hasbro came up with this solid one-piece base we talked about. This base has the advantage in that it doesn't fall over as much as the lightweight figures from before, so it's relatively reliable for, and here again I said relatively reliable for longer flicks, hitting the ball there. The shooting, again, one piece base, a much flatter base at the bottom, but again a harder edge. There is a little bit of a rounding on the edge here, so with practice with these Hasbro solid bases as they're referred to, it is possible to chip the ball, but still quite difficult, and you usually have to have the ball very close to the base to be able to chip the ball up. We're now moving into, we talked about the, this is a professional level base here. Unfortunately not very easy to get a hold of right now. These are the sports figures. And one advantage of these is that they were able to be curled, for example, around the ball, which could get you out of really tight spots for top level players. A little bit different flicking technique with this type of figure. Sadly, I'm not very skilled with the use of this figure, but it is certainly possible. Players can do a lot of chipping with this type of figure. But again, available in Europe mostly, and even there, they're not seen that often anymore. Subbuteo, Hasbro is still selling Subbuteo products, but this is their latest base, and it's actually gone back to a very narrow base at the bottom, and there's actually an etched logo in the bottom of there, and it's very high, and a little bit of a rounded base at the top, but unfortunately it's higher, and this rounded part doesn't help you in being able to shoot. What happens with this figure, of course, the etching on the bottom means that it can be very unreliable and with falling over as you strike the ball. You know, still can be a fun game. Falls over a lot. Not as well balanced as, of course, the sports figure, which would actually keep it upright. So that's the latest there from Hasbro. Moving on to like the Sure Shot GT bases, we carry a lot at Table Soccer USA. This type of base, much more stable, and you'll see the figure not wobbling around as we're flicking against it. Hopefully you can see that. We'll try a longer flick here. See how good I am this morning? Not too bad. So very reliable. And with this base, we can hopefully, I'll see if we can get a chip here, okay, and chip the ball up. I think we saw that it chipped up. So that's actually a lot of fun when you get to shooting and brings a whole different dimension to the game. And those are bases we typically carry here at Table Soccer USA. In Europe, there are many small cottage industries making bases because the game's quite popular there in countries like Italy and Germany, France, England, etc. And this is a base called a Rexy base. This one is a two-part base, and with the Sure Shot maybe a little bit harder on the outside of the base, this one has a particularly fine touch, very, very soft plastic material. It allows you to turn without basically hardly even touching the ball, which is a great advantage in tight spots if you're playing a really good player. And again, with this, hopefully we can see the chipping. I'll see what my skill levels are up to early this morning. And even over the goal there. My goodness. Okay, I need to work on my shooting, I guess. While we're on the equipment, let's look at some of the goalkeepers too, okay? And maybe we'll come back to that. I think we'll stop right there on the figures. Table Soccer USA is your place to come for table soccer supplies, and thank you.